Hey YouTubers, it's me again, Lonnie Clark. 2 times in one day. Actually, you're going to see me a few times this weekend because I have a few more videos that are not reading books that I'm just spitting nails to talk about. But let's stick to the program here. I'm reading Dr. Helen Caldicott's book, The New Nuclear Dangers, and we are on chapter 4 now. And I have not picked it up to see how far chapter 4 is, but I noticed that the last time I read it was 44 minutes. I do not want to go 44 minutes again. I think that's way too long. So the time is 12:04 now, so I'm going to read till about maybe 12:30 max, and then at that I'm going to cut it off. So take my glasses off so I can read better. Okay, so chapter 4, Corporate Madness and the Death Merchants. Didn't we read this? Chapter 4 and the Death Merchants? I guess not. I don't think so. Sorry about this, you guys. I'm just going to keep going. If I'm reading it again, you're just going to have to listen to me read it again. Chapter 4 and the Death Merchants. I see in the near future a crisis approaching that universe in me causes me to tremble for the sake of my country. Corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow. And the money and power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of people until all wealth is aggregated in the few hands and the republic is destroyed. Abraham Lincoln, November 21, 1864. Let me read that again. I don't think we read this before. That for sure cements it. Chapter 4, Corporate Madness and the Death Merchants. I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the sake of my country. Corporations have been enthroned, and an era of corruption in high places will follow. The money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. Abraham Lincoln, November 21, 1864. Who runs the Congress all these years later? The transnational corporations whose executives wine, dine, woo, bribe, and corrupt the office holders of the White House and Congress. From the president and vice president to almost all the elected congressional officials, these all-powerful corporations manipulate and control most of the federal legislation, foreign and domestic, that passes through Congress. They do it through a variety of mechanisms: think tanks, corporate mergers, lobbying, and political donations. Pretty much. Think tanks. In the 70s, leading international corporations jointly organized and endowed. You know what? Hold on just a second. I'm going to turn on the light. I just realized I'm just sitting in too dark of a room. Sorry. Think tanks. In the 70s, leading international corporations jointly organized and endowed a series of think tanks, their own little battle management organizations, whose primary purpose was to sway popular and political opinion in the direction useful to the think tank's corporate sponsors. These think tanks are satisfied by erudite researchers who produce editorials, TV news pieces, papers, media releases, legislative material, which are well-conceived, well-researched, well-written, easy to understand, and very acceptable to the media and Congress. Production of this material is orchestrated in a timely fashion to guide specific pieces of legislation. Most Washington-based think tanks also have a very pervasive presence in the media, their spokespeople being regular political commentators on the Sunday morning talk shows and in print. And I mean, didn't we see that happen this last week, you guys? I was stunned. Literally, Trump changed his mind, and oh, now it's a manipulation. A week later, it is not treason. It is just, oh, he misspoke, but he's so clever. He's a manipulator. He's manipulating Putin. Let's get back to this book. Treetops Propaganda. If the mass will be free of the chains of iron, it must obey the chains of silver. If it will not love, honor, and obey, it must not expect to escape seduction. Harold Laswell, leading American scholar of propaganda, 1939. I'm going to read that again because this is a new subtopic, treetop propaganda. So let me read this quote. If the mass will be free of the chains of iron, it must obey the chains of silver. If it will not love, honor, and obey, it must not expect to escape seduction. Wow. Harold Lassing, leading American scholar on propaganda, 1939. This broad-reaching, sophisticated, high-level manipulation of the so-called free democratic media and legislature is known as treetops propaganda. And it has been extraordinarily successful for sponsoring corporations and the points of view they espouse. Such an approach effectively controls government agendas in many countries, certainly including the United States, and is more effective by far than grassroots organizing for all but the very few issues around which millions of concerned citizens can be mobilized. The right-wing think tanks almost alone created the new conservative movement of the 1970s. Thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Caldicott. But these think tanks are neither free nor democratic. They are non-elected private bodies controlled by wealthy, powerful corporations. In effect, they are advertising agencies acting for the corporations that founded and fund them. They represent the corporate philosophy of economic rationalism, which favors the corporate takeover of all public enterprises, from healthcare and education to water and electricity, and an agenda that includes decreasing or abolishing government regulation of big business, decreasing corporate taxes and taxes for the rich, destroying the unions, and increasing corporate profits. Ding, 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 ding. Welcome to Trump Nation, man. The IMF, the World Bank, GATT, NAFTA, NAFTA, APEC, FTAA, and WTO have all taken their cues from these think tanks. One of the most influential think tanks is the Heritage Foundation, funded by transnational corporations and wealthy individuals, including Amway, who is now our Secretary of Defense, Hyundai, Exxon, who used to be she's our Secretary of Education. He used to be the Secretary of State. Philip Morris, United Parcel Service, Joseph Coors, Timothy Mellon, Sarah Scaife Foundation. The Heritage Foundation's income for 1999 was $43.6 million. The Heritage Foundation established a comprehensive list of agenda items for the Reagan presidency, which they entitled Mandate for Leadership, Policy Management in a Conservative Administration. Items included arming America to fight and win a nuclear war and to develop superiority over the Soviet Union. Most of these agenda items became policy. They followed up by issuing another mandate for leadership in Reagan's second term. So they spend money to tell the government what they want. Wow. Okay. Think tanks and the military-industrial complex. The think tanks exert a huge amount of influence on behalf of the military-industrial complex. The Heritage Foundation is still very much involved in promoting the nuclear arms race in all arenas, actively lobbying for Star Wars. That's the Carl Grossman book I'm reading. Other powerful right-wing think tanks that involve themselves in American nuclear security include the American Enterprise Institute and the Cato Institute. Yet another think tank, the Center for Security Policy. Are you kidding me? The Center for Security Policy serves as the nerve center of the Star Wars lobby. It was organized by Frank Gaffney, a Pentagon official under Reagan and a high priest of missile defense. And she has a little tiny asterisk here at the bottom that says, in January 1998, a world chief bank economist, Joseph Stiglitz, attracted worldwide attention during a lecture he gave in Helsinki when he criticized this so-called Washington consensus. Stiglitz pointed out that Washington inspired austerity, privatization, and deregulation, which has become the standard policy prescription for much of the world, was misguided and often disastrous. He said that the market ideologues using economic crises in various countries as excuses to discredit government intervention and to promote a more market liberalization. And by liberalization, they mean like no regulation. He argued, contrary to the economic rationalist time, that modern inflation is fairly harmless. Budget deficits are not necessarily evil. Privatization is not a panacea, and deregulation of domestic and international finance markets can do serious harm. Not surprisingly, he was fired from the World Bank at the end of 1999. Wow. Okay, back to where we were. Okay. It was organized, now this we're talking about the Center for Security Policy, was organized by Frank Gaffney, a Pentagon official under Reagan and a high priest of the missile defense. Gaffney also heads the Coalition to Protect Americans Now, a group that organizes TV ads to promote missile defense and all-out Star Wars. One ad depicts visions of babies in their cradles and playing baseball, interspersed with missiles falling from the sky and a caption reading, "Where will you be when the missiles are launched?" I remember that commercial. Do you guys? I think they stopped it. That sort of created such an outrage. CSP is funded by military contractors. Oh my God, that's offensive. CSP is funded by military contractors, including Lockheed Martin, Boeing, TRW, General Dynamics, Rockwell International, and Northrop Grumman. Wait a minute. Let's get this like logic straight. These are all subcontractors building our nuclear military weapons, all our bombs, perpetrating all the massive violence on the planet that we are stuck paying because we have to pay our tax dollars because they are buying our lobbyists because they created this think tank, CSP. So they're using our tax dollars to create the think tanks to control our government. Oh, Lord, really? Okay. And this is our reality, folks. That's why we call this show The Age of Fission. That's why when we get down to it, this is really the nuts and bolts of why I call this show The Age of Fission, because we are in the stew. Welcome to the show. Okay. CSP is funded by military contractors, including Lockheed Martin, Boeing, TRW, General Dynamics, Rockwell International, and Northrop Grumman. CSP's board includes 6 Lockheed Martin executives, members of the Heritage Foundation, President Reagan's senior advisor, George Keyworth. I wonder who's on there now. We should look this up, but I'm not going to take the time. 2 staunch Republican supporters of missile defense, Senator John Kyle of Arizona, who's, thank goodness, gone, and Representative Kurt Weldon of Pennsylvania, and I think he's still around, and the notorious and now elderly and evil. That's my assumption, Lonnie Clark. Edward Teller, the inventor of the hydrogen bomb. Teller calls Star Wars the third generation of nuclear weapons, the atomic bomb being the first and the hydrogen bomb being the second. For 32 years, he urged the nuclear weapons labs to conduct more research on, quote, defensive weapons, unquote. Arr. The CSP packs a powerful corporate punch, publishing over 200 press releases a year, euphemistically called National Security Decision Briefs. What? They're called National Security Decision Briefs. Okay, that's what we got to start doing. We got to start issuing national security decision briefs. Like, we're going to issue a national security decision breach that is absolutely urgent. We get CGS, Columbia Generating Station, shut down immediately. Not because it costs the taxpayers $500 million a year, because it's running at a $500 million plus deficit, but because of the proximity factor. Because the proximity factor says that Columbia Generating Station is only 12.7 miles away from Hanford, which requires 24-hour maintenance of some of those most horrific tanks on the planet, that if you don't stir them up 24 hours a day and get the machines in there to stir them up, then they could potentially create a fire that will be unstoppable for hundreds of thousands of years. And even Tom Carpenter, who is an attorney and understands Hanford, he works for Hanford Challenge, he said, you're quite right. That's exactly right. You're not really being hysterical. That's actually a real threat. So I call it the proximity factor. That makes the Columbia Generating Station a threat to every living person in the Northern Hemisphere. So there, we're going to start issuing that. We're going to issue our own. That is just beyond comprehension. National Security Decisions Briefs. I'm going to start doing a press release. Oh my gosh. I have got to write that down. Hold on. Press release. 200 press releases. Because that is so outrageous. Sorry, you guys. 200 press releases. National Security Briefs decision, right? Or decision briefs. Like, who gets to say they get to decide what's a national security decision brief? In 1998, the Center for Security Policy gave its Keeper of the Flame Award to Donald Rumsfeld, the former defense secretary under Ford, and now the Secretary of Defense in the present Bush administration. Another notable recipient of the award included Ronald Reagan and Newt Gingrich. Those two I could understand, but this is just, I'm sorry to laugh, you guys. We're talking Donald Rumsfeld, who still cannot travel the world because he still has a warrant for his arrest. If he goes to Paris, he gets arrested. The last time he was in Paris, he had to flee his hotel room in his pajamas. Back to the book, page 27. We are on Dr. Helen Caldicott's book, New Nuclear Danger, and it's called George Bush's Military-Industrial Complex. We can just skip the name of the president because it's the same thing. The only thing is now we have a president who fully embraces this and thinks it's a great idea and can't wait to be the oligarch that runs it all. And we have the Republican Party, as described, behaving in her worst dreams. So, well, I want to thank KEPW 97.3 for actually carrying this book reading on their radio station. So I'm going to piece them all together and post this one up too also. So let's get back to the book, because I am knocked off my socks by some of this stuff, as you can tell. But even as early as 1983, when Reagan, under Teller's guidance, gave his speech advocating Star Wars, Most credible scientists knew that the scientific hypotheses upon which the theory was based, that a comprehensive and effective missile shield could be built, was simply unworkable. $70 billion in a string of uninterrupted technical failures later, the Center for Security Policy, the Heritage Foundation, Lockheed Martin, TRW, Raytheon, and Boeing remain committed to the Star Wars concept, and the country is still trying to build a missile shield. I guarantee you they have something, and they are just not telling us, Dr. Caldicott. So it's not like they are failing. We're just not on a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know. So it's 7:24. Let's see. Where are we? Because this is going to go on for quite a while. Let's see. How many pages did I actually read? I know I give a lot of commentary. Only 3 pages. Okay, I'll keep going until the next subtitle. Okay. How the think tanks resuscitated Star Wars. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, it became necessary for the corporations, their think tanks, the State Department, and the Pentagon to invent new excuses to justify this unworkable, enormously expensive scientific and military adventure. First, the new arch enemy had to be found, and North Korea, a country unable to feed its own people, was the propagandist machine number one choice. Originally labeled, along with Iraq, a rogue state by the State Department, and now called a state of concern, North Korea does have a single missile that could hit, North Korea does not have a single missile that could hit the U.S., nor any nuclear weapons. Now, that is not true, because you know what happened under Bush? Bush stopped all the inspections, and within a few years, this was written in 2002. So by 2006, Kim Jong-un had 1 weapon, and here we are 18, and I have heard tell it's over 20, right? First it was like, oh, he has a few weapons. He has 5, he has 3, he has 2, and now it's like over 20. So what does he really have? We don't know. But he's still a good little target. That whole little poor, depressed area. Anyways. Okay, so first, the new archenemy had to be found, in North Korea's, a country unable to feed its own people, was the propaganda machine's number one choice. Okay. John Pike, then with the Federation of American Scientists, commenting on the North Korean missile test site, said, "This facility was not intended to support and in any respects is capable of supporting the extensive test program that would be needed to develop a reliable missile program. The site has no transportation links, no paved roads, no storage facilities for repellent, and no staff housing. Nonetheless, the ongoing demoniacal representation of North Korea is important to the Pentagon because it has been and is used to justify the only U.S. military deployment on mainland Asia. The U.S. maintains 37,000 troops in South Korea. Adherence to this policy is essential because it gives the U.S. a reason to maintain a military presence and a belligerent policy in the Asian country, while it is currently positioning itself to cast China as the next major enemy on the horizon. Though recently Afghanistan has, on an acute basis, replaced China as a major Pentagon focus. Consequently, the Pentagon, State Department, and military industry have worked with the leading think tanks to make the public case for the need to defend the U.S. from the rogue state. So important that the North Korean threat to the U.S. military policy that William Cohen's first question to policy officials when he became Secretary of Defense in 1994 was, how can we change the assumption that U.S. troops will be withdrawn after peace comes to the Korean Peninsula? I guess that's a simple statement, right? They have no plans of leaving. Unfortunately, this enemy is not behaving according to plan. For one thing, North Korean President Kim Jong-il and South Korean President Kim Dae-jung signed a peace treaty on June 15, 2000, agreeing that they needed reconciliation and the establishment of peace. Oh, no wonder the CIA gave Kim Jong-un the bomb. They could not have this. A military officer who closely follows the situation noticed that the U.S., in my opinion, is obsessed with the status quo, and said that the Pentagon was underestimating the potential for peaceful breakthrough, and resisting change in its forces in South Korea could ease tensions further. North Korea even informed Russian President Putin that it would abandon its fledgling missile program in exchange for Western aid in building scientific satellites. But the State Department remains less convinced. As one department spokesman insisted, the threat of war is still there. In terms of the North Korean military capability, they still have over 1 million troops ready to go. And in the spring of 1999, despite the problems brought on by Korean peacemaking, the Star Wars partisans claimed success. Their prodigious lobbying efforts, corporate political donations, and propaganda exercises persuaded the House and the Senate to pass legislation stating that the official policy of the United States government is to deploy a national missile defense as soon as technically feasible. Hold on. A Pentagon intelligence report quoted in the New York Times in September 2000 concluded that North Korea remains a dangerous military threat. And when Kim Dae-jung, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, visited George W. Bush soon after Bush's inauguration, he was essentially snubbed by the president and his staff. I'm going to end there. The next subtitle is Corporate Mergers and Nuclear Policy. It's going to be quite a good read. So thank you guys for following my channel. Please subscribe, Nuts for Art, NUTZFORART. Please feel free to share this video because I think this information needs to get out there, and people don't read books. That's why I decided to read these books. And I'm reading, here I'll show you Carl Grossman's book. In case either of these get taken down by the publisher, I've gotten verbal authorization from both of the authors to read it on my YouTube channel because people need to hear this stuff and we want them to get it out. Things are getting serious and it's time for us to really call out the people that are doing, I think just by telling the facts, that council, I can't believe that we're paying them our tax dollars to build this thing. So anyways, I don't know if you guys think that's not crazy, but that's the topic for another day. Ciao, you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.